pressured to act just because somebody says that. In negotiating, we call this being the reluctant buyer. Don't be too eager to buy someone's stuff, because as far as they're concerned, you've got tons of properties you're looking at, which should be true. And so you get to decide which one you're going to buy. Maybe it's theirs, maybe it's somebody else's. So you're the one that's in control, not them. So try to maintain your control, but not being too rattled if they say they've got another offer. Daryl and I talked earlier I think it was last week actually, about an investor who, this is a paraphrase. He didn't literally say you can't steal my property, but basically he was positioning the offer that we're making as being ridiculously low, a lowball offer, because he's worth so much more. And again, this is not an underwriting issue, right? This is not I ran the numbers and the numbers are wrong. This is a perception issue by the investor. This is somebody who, for a variety of reasons, believes that their property is worth way more than it actually is. And I think I've said this myself on these calls, it's not our job to be right. It's not our job to convince these people that their belief about the value of their property is wrong, because we're never going to win that argument, right? They're always going to, no matter what we say, they're going to think, oh, that's self-serving. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to get my asking price. So my point is, don't try to win the argument. Don't even have the argument, because it has nothing to do with us. It has everything to do with them and their circumstances. So let's just use an example. Let's say that the seller is trying to sell a property that they believe is worth $100,000. We think it's worth half that. And let's say they own it free and clear. And we have a conversation with and let's say we do the math and the cash flow comes out to be $10,000. So let's say it comes out to be $5,000. So $5,000 a year. So if we bought that property at $50,000, that'd be a 10% cash on cash return, assuming it needs repairs. That'd be a good deal. But they don't want 50, they want 100, which is, in our opinion, twice as much as it should be worth. Here's the thing. We don't have to convince them that we're right. What we have to do, what I suggest that we do, is have a businessman or businesswoman, business person to business person conversation about a little something that I call return on equity, right? So if I'm an investor and I have real estate property that I own, I'm not selling it. I own it. $100,000 is what I think it's worth, and I own it. I'm getting a return on that $100,000. I'm the owner. I'm getting, we said, $5,000 in cash flow every year. So whether I sell it to an investor or not, that's what I'm making on my money, right? Well, $100,000. If I think it's worth $100,000 and I have no debt, then the return on equity looks a whole lot like return on income. It's cash flow. Technically speaking, it's cash flow after taxes, but let's ignore the taxes for now. It's cash flow divided by equity. Cash flow we said was 5,000. Equity we said was they think it's 100,000. That means 5,000 over 100,000. That's 5 over 100. That's 5%. So by demanding that they want $100,000, they think it's worth $100,000. What they're basically telling you is that they are prepared. They are already accepting a 5% return on their equity, because they're getting $5,000 and they think it's worth 100, and they have no debt. So they're basically saying, I'm sitting on $100,000 in equity, and I'm only getting $5,000 a year for it. That's a crappy return. That's a horrible return. So rather than trying to convince them that they should sell it to us for a lower return, we simply turn that around and say, hey, wow, I'm surprised that you'd be willing to accept such a low return on your property. And that, saying it that way, takes us out of the equation entirely, because it's not about us. There's nothing about, we didn't say you have to sell it. We didn't say you have to give it to me at a discount. We simply said, wow, I'm surprised that you'd be willing to accept such a low return on equity for this property. 5% is really low. I would think if you're willing to accept 5%, honestly, you'd be better off giving me your money and letting me put it to work, and I could probably make you 8% or 9%, maybe even 10%. So saying it that way isn't self-serving, because it has nothing to do with us. And it's a way to make people a little bit unsettled, because you're now attacking their business skills as they should be attacked. Because if he really does think that it's worth $100,000 and he really doesn't have any debt on it, then he's basically saying, I'm prepared to accept 5% return on my equity, which is pretty awful. I mean, it's better than zero, but it's not great. So having that conversation, in my opinion, is an effective strategy for dealing with those folks. I mean, the reality is that we can't make them do anything, but making them feel a little foolish about what they think is a good thing, in my opinion, starts to shake their foundations a little bit, and they start to wonder, maybe I don't know something that I should be knowing, I should be aware of. And again, I didn't invent return on equity. It's a real thing. If you go on Google and say, what is return on equity? It'll tell you it's cash flow after taxes divided by equity. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Daryl and I had this conversation already, but I wanted to share it with the group because it is a bit advanced, but it's just math, right? Cash flow divided by equity. And just so that you know, the longer you hold a property, so let's say I buy a property this year for $100,000. Let's say I buy it with a little bit of debt. Let's say I buy it with $80,000 in debt and $20,000 in down payment. Over time, if I bought right, the property is going to increase in value, I hope. Over time, because of the way the mortgage is going to work, my loan balance is going to shrink because I'm going to be paying off that debt. So the longer I have the property, the more it's going to be worth and the less debt I'm going to have. And my equity is the difference between those two. So if it starts to become worth more and more and more, and the debt becomes lower and lower and lower, I accumulate more and more in equity, which is a good thing. However, if I accumulate equity at a faster rate than rents go up, then at some point, if you charted my return on equity over time, if you typically look at these investments at around like the 10-year mark, you start to fall off in return on equity because it's worth so much more. You basically have all this money stuck. I call it debt equity. It's sitting in this property, not doing you anything except, in theory, at least earning you this cash flow, but you accumulate more and more and more of it, and you're not generating more and more and more rents. So the longer you hold property, in many cases, the worse your return on equity becomes. That's why a lot of commercial deals you'll see are only for like 3 to 5 years, because after about 3 to 5 years, they need to sell that property and reinvest someplace else so they can start all over again with a better return on equity. So again, I don't want to belabor that point. I just wanted to my bigger point in this is that when you're talking to an investor, we don't have to convince them we're right. We just have to plant the seed in their heads that maybe they don't know everything there is to know about this. It's not about us, it's about them, because return on equity has nothing to do with us. We're not saying you should sell your property. We're simply saying if you run the numbers on your existing investment, you'll see that your return on equity is not so great. If you think it's worth $100,000 and you only get $5,000 a year, your return on equity is In fact, it's below So anyway, that's just a little dagger you can stick into the dagger's kind of violent. It's a little seed of doubt you can plant in the seller's head, because a lot of these sellers, they're not, I mean, again, I was one of them, not particularly sophisticated in numbers and don't necessarily understand what return on equity is. They think as long as that rent's coming in and their equity is going up, that's a good thing. And that's a good thing until it's not a good thing. But anyway, does that make sense? I wanted to make sure we covered at least those two, because those aren't underwriting related. Those are more seller psychology related. But I think you're all going to discover that the biggest opportunities here aren't in the spreadsheets, are in getting into the minds of the seller and helping them understand why what you're proposing is worth pursuing. So let's talk. I do want to talk tech stuff. And for this, I'm going to start with you, Sassy. I want to work through the terms offer that you had, and I want everybody to see it, because terms offers, I think, are the things that most of us get excited about, because from our standpoint, we're creating money out of thin air, and it's in many ways the trickiest because it's got a lot of moving parts. So it's about $150,000 in repairs. You see the numbers here, $4,300 in rents, and when we run the numbers, we get an attractive return and an attractive cash on cash. That'd be a great deal to buy cash, and then we're going to turn around and sell it for $150. So we're going to buy it for $130, sell it for $150. And the investor that buys that is going to get 10.49% cash on cash. So we could theoretically bump this up a little higher, shave this down to more like 10. And it would clear a wholesale fee of about 17.5, which is the 150 minus the 130, which is 20. But you might recall we pay the seller's closing costs. So 20 minus 2,500, that's the 1750. So that cash, if we could get them to accept that 130, the seller that is, that'd be a great deal. We're not sure that they'll accept that 130, so we wanted to have in our back pocket a higher offer, and that's where terms come in. So let's talk about that. So this is now the terms tab of this very same spreadsheet. And again, if you have any questions, just go ahead and call them out because we're a small enough group. So before we were talking buying it for 130, now we're looking at buying it for 175, which is substantially higher. I don't think the seller was asking for anything specific. Sassy, correct me if I'm wrong. Sassy?
Yep, I'm trying to unmute. So just a little bit of history on this property. I have been dealing with this woman for the past 2 years. So I was going to wholesale this property 2 years ago. This is before I even got licensed as a realtor. And she wanted 150. Now, at the time, there were no back taxes due on the property because in Philadelphia County, in Philadelphia, you could actually see how much taxes somebody owes and all that good stuff. And any property liens or anything like that, you could be able to see that. So fast forward, I had a partner, wasn't able to wholesale the deal. Not sure why, but wasn't able to wholesale the deal, probably because we didn't have photos at the time. So she reached out to me last year, and I was just trying to push it off because I just didn't feel like being bothered, but she called me again. So I did tell them that they owe 26 grand total, and not back taxes, but liens and stuff on the property because the weeds and stuff overgrew. So the city went and cleaned it up, and of course they charged it. They put that lien on the property basically for that. So from talking to the daughter, this is a probate thing. They went through the process to get the property put in the surviving heir's name. The daughter stated or alluded to that she would want to get the money. But when I told her, I said, you're going to pay capital gains tax. She didn't like that idea. So hoping to send them this offer tomorrow at the latest so they can have it and let me know what they decide to do. What the owner decides to do. But yeah, that's the little backstory on it.
Nice.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for that. Now remind me again, how much were the back taxes? Roughly?
The taxes are not overdue. It's actually liens. So the taxes, I guess her brother, before he died, I think he must have paid the taxes up for X amount of years, because now when you look on the website, the taxes are not due until December 31st of this year. So there were no taxes due before. What you see now, though, is that the city put a lien on a property for that back amount for when they went and cleaned up the bushes and all that good stuff. So that's what's on the account now, the house now.
Got it. And how much is that roughly, that amount?
24 grand, 23, because the taxes are 2096 are the taxes. So I want to say like 23 grand.
Okay. It's relevant because when we do the seller finance, when we do the terms offer, all they're going to get at closing is 20K. So if they only got 20K, they'd have to come out of pocket, but we have to clear off all those judgments and liens to transfer title. So we need to make sure that we give them enough money. Whatever we give them, out of that's going to be deducted what they have to pay for closing, because otherwise we'd have to come to closing with funds, and we don't do that. So if I know this is not your final version, but if our offer were we'll pay 175 and 20,000 down, that's going to mean they would actually get no cash at closing because all of that would be sucked up paying off the liens.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get updated on our new upcoming videos soon. Thank you so much for watching.